Well, the US says it's looking into what many have called a conspiracy theory. And there is a new report claiming that China sat on critical information for a number of days and that Beijing has been withholding crucial information.
This is where China directed the world's attention, suggesting that this Wuhan seafood market was the source of the novel coronavirus outbreak. CNN even traveled there just before the city locked down in January. Officials had shut down the wet market, and security told us to leave. U.S. intelligence officials tell CNN they are investigating another possible source, suggesting the virus may not have originated naturally as China has advertised, but rather that it possibly started in a Wuhan lab. Chinese officials pushing back against that claim on Thursday, the foreign ministry spokesperson dismissing that the virus started in a lab, instead stressing that, quote, this is a scientific issue that should be studied by scientists and medical experts. Yet, it is the same spokesperson who last month floated a controversial theory, tweeting that it might be the U.S. Army who brought the epidemic to Wuhan.
China tried to say at one point, maybe there's stuff now, that it was caused by American soldiers. That can't happen. It's not going to happen. Not as long as I'm president. It comes from China.
Our relationship with China was good until they did this. Once we found out about this, look, we just made a trade deal with China. It's going to have to buy $250 billion a year in our product, $50 billion from the farmers, $40 to $50 billion from the farmers. It depends. Was it a mistake that got out of control, or was it done deliberately? Okay, there's a big difference between those two.
Do you think that there should be some consequences if in the end, China was responsible for all of this?
If they were knowingly responsible, yeah, then there should be consequences. Talking about, potentially lives like nobody's seen since 1917.
If we don't go to war over the loss of 31,000 now, and certainly more to come, 31,000 American lives, what do we go to war over? Because whether they did it intentionally or not, we do know this, they did it. That virus was unleashed on the world, and they lied, and that is the same as making it an intentional and conscious act of warfare, as far as I'm concerned. I think the priority should be national security. And I think national security means that you secure your own forces, wherever they are. And I also think that if you think if the Chinese are a priority, then in national security terms, what is our response? What do we do? Because we just can't sit here and take it, just as we couldn't with, that Iranian vessel 10 yards off the bow of a Coast Guard cutter.
The aircraft carrier Theodore Roosevelt, at sea, a symbol of American force as China expands activity in the Pacific and South China Sea. Until recently. Since late March, it has been anchored off a U.S. naval base in Guam, following a coronavirus outbreak on board. Meanwhile, China has deployed warships and its aircraft carrier liaoning to waters between Japan and Taiwan. A Chinese ship was also recently sighted off the Vietnamese coast. And earlier in April, a Chinese Coast Guard vessel reportedly rammed a Vietnamese fishing boat. It's been criticized by the United States, but Beijing describes the incident as a collision.
The Paracel and Spratlys Islands are Chinese territories. Relevant claims from Vietnam violate the international laws, including the United Nations Charter and the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, and are illegal and invalid.
China's intent is to so overwhelm the region with its navy, its coast guard, its militia, its fishing fleets, that Southeast Asian governments decide that there is no reasonable choice but surrender.
Just last year, Filipino fishermen accused a Chinese vessel of sinking their boat and abandoning them.
We shouldn't put up with any of it, but we particularly need to send a strong message to the Chinese. They think they're getting away with it. They think they're going to come out of this crisis.
What is the message?
They're going to be
what is the
top.
message?
They think in 2 or 3 years. Well, I would make sure that U.S. military and U.S. Navy forces are in the South China Sea, making clear that we are not leaving the South China Sea. We are not leaving the Western Pacific. We should let the Chinese know that we think that they're going to try to purchase American companies.
On increasingly troubled waters, the U.S. Navy's putting on a show of strength, joining Australian warship HMAS Parramatta for military exercises through the South China Sea. Since the coronavirus pandemic began, China's rapid military build-up in this disputed region has continued unabated, with Beijing fortifying artificial reefs and confronting other nations who claim the territory as their own.
To the Chinese, it's a big opportunity for them to stake their claims in South China Sea and make it theirs once and for all.
The strategic region's also vital for oil supplies. More than 30% of global trade in maritime crude makes its way through here.
We know that Saudi Arabia has a price target they need for their economy to keep going. Russia does. Who has the upper hand in this battle between Saudi Arabia and Russia?
Saudi Arabia, absolutely.
How low can oil go? Some traders are definitely seeing the prices heading below $20 a barrel.
Moscow is saying that everyone is waiting for Riyadh or Russia to blink, and Putin is saying it's not going to be him. An incredible scoop by our bureau in Moscow. And some of the people they were speaking to is saying that he has this strong man. This is the cultivated image that Putin has, and he's not going to back down to anyone. He's been in helm for 2 decades. He's been through crises like this, and they have built Russian reserves for this moment. They didn't expect to be in this moment, this price war with Saudi, but now that they're in it, they maintain that they could be the ones that can last the longest.
Strategists and the market, they're not convinced that President Trump will actually be able to support the price.
Our top story this morning. US oil prices have become technically worthless as crude futures collapsed below $0 on Monday. That's the first in history as concerns over weak energy demand reached a historic high in light of the coronavirus pandemic.
U.S. crude oil futures ended the first trading of the day at minus $37.63 a barrel, entering negative territory for the first time ever. The plunge has been unprecedented in its velocity. The price was around $60 a barrel at the turn of the year, less than 4 months ago. Oil prices fell off a cliff due to oversupply as billions of people around the world are forced to stay home.
If this turns out to be a biological weapon, KT, if this happens to be a conscious and overt act on the part of the Chinese military, and we know that biological warfare is part of their military doctrine, a significant part, just as cyber warfare or any other. If this were to turn out to be that, we have to have an answer now.
If China has unleashed chemical biological warfare on the world, not only the United States, but on the world, then I think it is the beginning of a new Cold War, which they have started.
I believe the U.S. is in such a weakened condition that a major world war would be the only thing that the elite running this country have come to the conclusion we have to fight a mega war, and it's our only chance. We're in debt so much. The society's fractioning. It's splitting apart. We're going to civil war. We have to do something radical, and it's going to be a global war, most likely with China. This would explain that Deagle.com, that mysterious website that projects that the U.S. population is going to drop to 90 million by the year 2025.
And we've been, talking about this particular site for years, who they are, what they're about, but the number has caused us has compelled our thinking to what are the possibilities? What could bring about such a drastic change in population? We were speculating, maybe a major weather event, solar event, maybe, a terrorist attack of some kind, maybe disease or something like that. It could be any combination of these things. But if we understand the cycles as they stand now, then we begin to understand, in order for America to even keep 90 million people, they have to have a war.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard says they have successfully launched the country's first military satellite. They say it is now orbiting at a distance of 425 kilometers from the Earth.
ما در عرصه گسترش قلمرو توانمندی‌های اطلاعاتی راهبردی با استفاده از این موفقیت به یک جهش رسیدیم.
The latest launch comes amid heightened tensions between Iran and America that have escalated since U.S. President Donald Trump broke the 2015 nuclear deal.
I think Iran needs to be held accountable for what they've done. They've now had a military organization that the United States has designated terrorists attempt to launch a satellite.
Donald Trump has ordered the United States Navy to open fire on any Iranian boats that, quote, harass its boats, as tensions continue to ramp up in the Gulf. Last week, 11 vessels from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard came dangerously close to US ships. President Trump has tweeted, "I have instructed the United States Navy to shoot down and destroy any and all Iranian gunboats if they harass our ships at sea." The instruction comes just hours after Tehran said it had launched the country's first military satellite into orbit.
Can we talk about Iran? You put out a message this morning making a rather big announcement for our military when it comes to Iranian aggression. Are you going to change formally rules of engagement for our U.S. military so that they can engage?
We're covered 100%. We don't want their gunboats surrounding our boats and traveling around our boats and having a good time. We don't want them anywhere near our boats. And so you know the order I gave. I don't think I have to say it again, but I've given that order. I noticed yesterday they did that in a much lighter form, but they did that again. I said we're not going to stand for it. I'm not going to let that happen. And we will. They'll shoot them out of the water.
And the threats to our nations, they don't sleep. They're watching our every move. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. We have been honed into a machine of lethal moving parts that you would be wise to avoid if you know what's good for you. We will not be intimidated. We will not back down. We've seen war. We don't want war. But if you want war with the United States of America, there's one thing I can promise you, so help me God. Someone else will raise your sons and daughters.
They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.